Imagine arriving on a new continent and discovering something waiting for you. Not a lion, not a tiger, not even a crocodile, a giant monitor lizard, possibly venomous, armed with curved, serrated teeth, and potentially larger than any lizard alive today. Some early estimates put this animal at an almost unbelievable 23 feet long. And here's the terrifying part. Early humans may have actually encountered it. Its name was Varanus priscus, better known as Megalania. And when humans reached ancient Australia, they entered a world filled with giant animals, unlike anything alive today. But Megalania may have been one of the most dangerous, because this wasn't simply an oversized lizard. Evidence from its relatives suggests it may have possessed another weapon, venom. So what would happen if an early human encountered one? And could the arrival of humans have actually helped bring the reign of Australia's giant lizard to an end? To understand just how frightening Megalania was, start with an animal that's still alive, the Komodo dragon. A modern Komodo can grow to around 10 feet long. It has sharp teeth, powerful muscles, and a venomous bite that helps weaken its prey. Now imagine something built on a similar monitor lizard blueprint, but considerably larger. That's Megalania. It lived during the Pleistocene in Australia, alongside an extraordinary collection of giant animals. There were enormous kangaroos, massive wombat relatives, giant flightless birds, huge snakes, and hunting among them was the largest terrestrial lizard known to science. But exactly how large Megalania became has become one of the most debated parts of its story, and the reason is simple. We're missing most of the animal. No complete Megalania skeleton has ever been discovered. Scientists have mostly had to work with isolated vertebrae, teeth, jaws, and limb bones. And when you're reconstructing an enormous extinct animal from fragments, estimates can change dramatically. Early reconstructions produced giants approaching 20 feet or more, with some estimates reaching roughly 23 feet. More conservative modern estimates generally make it smaller, around 11 to 16 feet. But think about that for a second. Even if the enormous 23-foot reconstruction was wrong, we're still talking about a monitor lizard that could potentially reach around the length of a car. And size wasn't its most frightening feature. Look inside its mouth. Megalania's teeth weren't built like the crushing teeth of a mammalian predator. They were curved, sharp, and serrated. They were designed to slice and tear flesh. But for decades, there was another possibility, hiding inside the biology of monitor lizards. Then, in 2009, researchers studying Komodo dragons made an important discovery. Komodo dragons possess venom glands. Their venom contains compounds that can contribute to lowered blood pressure, increased bleeding, and shock, while their teeth inflict devastating wounds. That changed the way scientists understood the Komodo dragon's bite, and it raised a much bigger question. What about Megalania? Researchers argued that because venom appears deep within the evolutionary history of monitor lizards and their relatives, Megalania likely possessed a venom system as well. We can't examine venom glands from an animal that's been extinct for tens of thousands of years, so we can't simply say, "We've found Megalania's venom." But the evolutionary evidence makes the possibility very real. And if Megalania was venomous, it may have been the largest venomous vertebrate known to science. Now imagine an early human facing one. You don't have a rifle, you don't have a vehicle, and you certainly don't have a hospital. You have other humans, fire, stone tools, and spears. And you're facing an animal whose entire body was built around doing one thing extremely well: finding and consuming other animals. But Megalania had another ability that would have made avoiding it difficult. Watch a modern monitor lizard closely, and you'll notice something constantly moving. Its tongue. That deeply forked tongue isn't just tasting the air. It's gathering chemical information from the environment. The tongue delivers those particles to the vomeronasal, or Jacobson's, organ. And because the tongue is forked, the animal can compare chemical information arriving from different directions. Essentially, it helps the lizard determine which direction is that smell coming from. For a predator or scavenger, that's an extraordinary ability. A giant monitor wouldn't necessarily need to see an animal first. Chemical traces could help lead it toward potential food. And now picture ancient Australia, a wounded animal, blood on the ground, a carcass somewhere in the distance, a group of humans processing an animal they had just killed. The smells alone could potentially attract predators or scavengers, including a giant monitor lizard. And this is where Megalania's story stops being simply about a prehistoric monster, because humans eventually entered this world. When the first people reached Australia, they weren't entering an empty wilderness. They were walking into the land of giants. And depending on the exact dates involved, Megalania may still have been there. This possibility is what makes the animal so much more fascinating than something like T. Rex. Humans never saw a T-Rex. We missed it by tens of millions of years. But megalania? Our ancestors may have looked directly at one. Imagine being among those first generations exploring the continent. You don't know which animals are dangerous. You don't know which watering holes predators use. You don't know what comes toward the smell of a fresh kill. Every generation has to learn. And mistakes can be fatal. But humans had something megalania didn't. We weren't particularly large. We weren't particularly fast. We didn't have claws. And our teeth were almost useless compared with those of a giant monitor. But humans had cooperation. One person with a spear against a giant predator sounds vulnerable. 10 people communicating, carrying weapons, and controlling fire? That's a completely different problem for the predator. Humans could share information, teach their children, plan hunts, modify landscapes, and coordinate against threats. Megalania had millions of years of evolution behind it. Humans had something evolution had also produced, a brain capable of changing the rules. And then something strange happened. Australia's giants began disappearing. Around the period following human arrival, Australia experienced a major wave of megafaunal extinction. Megalania disappeared. So did many other giant animals. And scientists have spent decades debating exactly why. Was it humans? Climate? Changes in vegetation? Fire? Or some combination? The answer isn't as simple as saying humans arrived and immediately hunted megalania into extinction. There's no evidence of some giant prehistoric war where humans systematically battled enormous lizards. Reality is probably much more complicated, but humans didn't necessarily need to hunt every megalania. Think about what happens when a new intelligent predator enters an ecosystem. Humans hunt prey. Humans use fire. Humans change landscapes. Humans compete for resources. Remove enough large herbivores and the predators depending on those animals suffer too. And there's another possibility. Humans didn't necessarily have to target the largest adults. Eggs and juveniles could have been much easier targets. Although direct evidence that people systematically did this to megalania is lacking. That's what makes the extinction mystery so interesting. Humans and megalania may have overlapped. Megalania disappears from the fossil record, but proving exactly what happened between them is much harder. And then comes the question that refuses to disappear. What if it didn't completely disappear? Every extinct monster eventually gets the same question. Could it still be out there? And with megalania, Australia provides the perfect setting for the legend. It's enormous, remote, and some regions have extremely low population densities. Stories and alleged sightings of unusually large monitor lizards have circulated for years. That sounds exciting, but there's a major problem. Evidence. An animal the size of megalania wouldn't just need somewhere to hide. You'd need a breeding population. Those animals would need food. They would leave tracks, droppings, carcasses, DNA, bodies, bones, and eventually, convincing photographs or video. We don't have reliable modern evidence demonstrating that megalania survived into the present. So scientifically, the answer is clear. Megalania is considered extinct. But maybe that's not the most interesting question anyway, because we don't need a living megalania to make this story incredible. The real animal was already terrifying enough. Let's return to our original scenario. You're standing in Pleistocene Australia, and somewhere nearby is a giant monitor lizard. Could you survive? Alone? Your chances probably aren't something you'd want to test. But early humans didn't conquer the planet by fighting dangerous animals one-on-one. That's the mistake we make when imagining our ancestors. Their greatest weapon wasn't the spear. It was each other. A megalania had teeth, potential venom, power, and millions of years of predatory instinct. Humans could communicate, plan, learn, remember, use fire, build weapons, and pass knowledge from one generation to the next. If someone discovered that a particular location contained a dangerous predator, that information could spread. If one hunting strategy worked, others could copy it. If one tool improved survival, humans could make another. That's the advantage predators around the world eventually encountered when humans arrived. We could adapt faster than they could. Was one of the most extraordinary predators ever to inhabit Australia. It was the largest terrestrial lizard known. It possessed serrated teeth. It may have been venomous, and depending on which size reconstruction you use, it ranged from enormous to almost unbelievable. But the part that fascinates me most isn't whether it reached 15 feet or 23. It's this. Humans may have actually shared its world. At some point in ancient Australia, it's entirely possible that a human looked across the landscape and saw a giant monitor lizard looking back. One species had teeth, size, and predatory adaptations. The other had fire, weapons, and cooperation. And only one of them is still here. So when we imagine prehistoric monsters, we usually think about dinosaurs. But some of the most terrifying animals in Earth's history didn't disappear millions of years before humans. Some survived long enough to potentially meet us, and Megalania was one of them. But it wasn't the only giant predator early humans encountered. Click the video on screen to see another prehistoric monster our ancestors may have had to survive. And subscribe if you want more stories about the creatures that once shared our world.